Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a 4-month review of our Talaria Sting e-bike. Anyone that has seen the channel knows I'm not easy on these bikes, and I'm going to try and give my most honest review here, tell you guys what I think about the bike. So guys, without further ado, let's get into this. As always guys, this video is sponsored by Talaria Studios. They just recently opened up shop over there and I cannot wait to get my hands on the upgrades coming out of here. Great group of guys working over there and they have amazing customer service. I highly recommend them for your Talaria Sting needs, or they also own sur-ron shop and I'd highly recommend them as well. Again, great company. And now back to the video. Alright guys, so here's our Talaria Sting e-bike. We're going to talk about the negatives about the bike first, because I know that's what everyone wants to hear. And then we're going to talk about the positives, or what kind of hiccups they'll run into, I should say. Nothing has gone wrong on the bike, well, besides the chain brake. The chain's the only thing that's broken on me, I promise. I'm going to try and not compare the sur-ron to it too much, so I will mention the sur-ron just a little bit, but I want to keep the topic about this bike. Alright, let's talk about the most important thing. First is the battery. The battery has held up phenomenal. I haven't had any problems with the pack, with it charging, with it discharging, nothing like that. No problem with the connector, it's still very tight. Here's the pack right here. The sur-ron actually, the bike actually scratches the battery pack. The Talaria doesn't, which is pretty nice. I really do love the inside of the Talaria. We got this little lever down here. So when the battery sits down in here, this little lever pushes it forward and holds it into place. So no problems with the battery pack. The Talaria also has these really nice rubber spacings over on here. On the sur-ron, they are not rubber, they're actually plastic. I am going to be a little nitpicky about this though. Even though we have a pressure plate down there that pushes the battery this way as you set the battery in the bike, even though that's on there, the battery still has a little bit of play in there, and you can hear that going around in the woods. And get some kind of spacer that comes down here and just kind of wedges this forward as I put the battery cap down, and hopefully that also keeps the cap from wiggling a little bit. The lid on these things tends to rattle while you're riding. It's not very bad. The lid is not as thick of plastic as the sur-rons, and up here, the housing up here isn't quite as tight. You don't have bolts coming out of the other side with nuts on them, so you can't tighten that down to make it tighter so it doesn't move. So it kind of has a little bit of a wiggle to it, and you can hear it when you're riding. And we got a little rubber piece up here that's meant to come down and kind of brace the battery from the top of the pack, which helps a little bit so the battery doesn't fly around. But this piece, the adhesive that was holding this rubber piece on there, that came off and I had to reapply that. So I like everything about the battery and the connectors. It's just a housing for the pack. Should have been just a little bit tighter so there isn't as much play. Not a huge deal. I am going to fix it and it's not really going to cost me anything. Going down to the gearbox, haven't had any problems with the gearbox at all. I have changed the oil in it once and it's been fine ever since. Back here in the gearbox area, I wish that the suspension, this is a new geometry for suspension, and some new bikes do have suspension built this way. If you guys have seen the sur-ron, the sur-ron's is a triangle that comes up here and goes through the shock. I prefer that because since the suspension, see if you guys can see in there, since the suspension is built like this, it comes up and then back, you cannot get your tire. Look how much room I got here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Look how much room I got in between the tire and the actual linkage for the bike. I could never get this tire, or really any tire, unless it was like a 16 or 17 rim, I could never scooch this up to that first cut because the rear linkage is going to hit the tire. I understand why they couldn't do it because of the gearbox. The gearbox is in the way of where the triangle would have been, so it's not too big of a deal because of how I have this set up. The rear linkage works fine. There's not a problem with it if you have the rear axle and your tire back far enough. It doesn't hit at all, so but that's just something to be aware of. Another thing down here, we got our chain going around our gearbox sprocket. When it gets dirty, it does kind of try and jump off. You can hear it when it's under a lot of load. I wish that there was a mud guard right here. I went through this mud pit, and right when I got out of it, you could hear it like ticking and trying to jump off that sprocket. It never did, but it's a horrible noise and I don't like it. And after I rode for a little bit, then it would clean off and it wouldn't do it anymore. The bash plate, I've already got dented in the bottom, so I'm waiting on someone to make a reinforced bash plate. Even on the sur-ron, they ship with these crappy aluminum bash plates. Nobody wants that. As far as the brakes go, the brakes work amazing. I love these brakes. Besides, the brake pads are wearing down really quick. I'm gonna have to switch them out already, but that's to be expected. These are mountain bike brakes on, in my opinion, a full-on 100 dirt bike, so they're not expected to last long. But the brakes themselves do work very well, very strong, very easy to grab onto, and the discs have really good stopping power. Controller doesn't have any problems, never overheated, nothing like that. I haven't even had rocks ding up and hit it yet. My sur-ron controller looks like it was in like a meteor shower or something. I have had problems with my horn. So the horn housing up here looks really solid. I like it a lot better than the sur-rons, but looks can be deceiving. I've had the horn actually fall off on me on a ride. Luckily the wires caught it, but I did lose the rear nut that was holding it onto the actual frame, so I had to go get a new one of those. Not a big deal, but it's not, I don't like that the horn is not an Allen wrench key in the middle, so I can't just tighten it whenever I want. I got a little bit of wear here from my boots, but that's normal. Nothing up here as far as the frame goes, just over by my boots. All right, so that is all the hiccups that I've run into thus far for the bike, but now we're going to get into the pros. These are all the things that I love about this bike, and I'm going to reinstate some of them from my first video that I made. So first off, I still absolutely love the size of the bike. Here I got a 21-inch in the front. I'm still doing a 19 in back, so it's like a motocross setup. It's bigger, it's beefier, it's wider. It feels much more like a dirt bike than the sur-ron does. One thing I will say, this is, if you guys are getting one of these bikes for riding on the road, I would definitely recommend the sur-ron. Every single time I've taken this guy into town or on the road or on the bike path or whatever, I get pulled over because it's a lot beefier, so it looks more like a dirt bike. This bike is more powerful than the Ron, but it is heavier, so top speed is basically the same. I think that the Talaria is just a little bit faster. I've been able to get this guy going faster. The seat profile is 100 times better than the sur-ron. You can scooch all the way. You can even, like, I usually end up sitting right here on turns, so I even like sit on the battery pack. I feel fine, and then I can scoot all the way back, and it's just a much bigger seat. Like I said in my other videos, it's a little bit heavier than the sur-ron that I used to ride, so I don't feel like I feel like I have more control when I'm riding on trails. Another thing that I've grown to like about this bike is that it's super easy to work on, easier than the sur-ron. The biggest difference is down here. You have so much room for your rear axle. You have nice big thick cut lines so you can actually see and line up your rear tire. And your rear nut extender, you actually have plenty of room to tighten and loosen it. It's a big deal, big problem on the sur-ron, and it's just something that they fixed here. Another thing that I like about the bike, obviously the swing arm is wider, but the swing arm is a lot stronger. It has a lot more beef to it as a whole, and the inside of it is a lot thicker, and it's not hollow like the sur-ron is. The sur-ron's is kind of cut in to save on weight. The Talaria is not, so that contributes to some of the weight there. The suspension on here, it's the same thing. It's an Ace, Fast Ace rear shock. I think that shock works fine. It's a 450-pound spring. I haven't had any problems with it. It's obviously not as smooth as like a Fox float, but it's still, I think it's really good for the bike. I've never had a problem with that shock on this bike or the sur-ron. And one of the biggest things about this bike that I have come to love is that almost every single sur-ron part is backwards compatible with this, minus just a couple things if it's concerning width, like the reinforced bracket in between the pegs. Sur-ron one obviously won't fit a Talaria because Talaria is wider, but this rear rotor guard is actually a sur-ron one. It wasn't going to work originally because this is wider, like I said, but I actually have a steering tube spacer. If you can see the little spacer in between the actual rotor guard and the bike right here, that round piece, that's actually a steering tube head spacer from this same color. So I just slapped it down there. I've rode it several times, works great. So if you guys do own a Talaria, there are ways to get around that little, you know, half an inch or inch wider frame design. So it's not really that big of a deal. Same thing with the Supermoto kit. You can just put spacers in between your swing arm and it works fine. I've done that too. All right guys, well that's pretty much what there all is to say about it when it comes to electric stuff. Besides the design, these electric motors and batteries, they last for a really long time. So the bike's holding out great. Haven't had any problems with it. There's just a couple things that I dislike about it, so I wanted to be sure to tell you guys. But the pros definitely outweigh the cons with this bike. All right guys, well that's my review of the Talaria Sting. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Leave a comment down below, like, comment, subscribe, all that shit. All right guys, that's my review of the Talaria Sting. Hope you guys enjoyed that video, and I'll see you in the next one.